have a special segment today, and that is Open Mic, where me and two others will discuss 3 albums in detail. So I have 2 guests with me today. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Kamea. I'm a music volunteer here at CFMU. I host On That Note. It's on 5 o'clock on Fridays.
Hi, I'm Ruth. I'm also a music volunteer at CFMU.
Awesome, thank you. So today we have 3 exciting albums to discuss. So the first one we'll talk about is what was just played. So Healing Power by Terra Lightfoot. Now this album was very recently released on October 13th. And Terra Lightfoot is actually from Hamilton, which is super exciting. Mm-hmm. And the album comes from Sonic Onion Records, which has released many great albums. So this was the anticipated album after Cross Border Lovers, which was her most famous single recently. I've been hearing it a lot around the station.
I think I played it on my show. Yeah. I actually Googled because I was curious if there was any relation to Gordon Lightfoot, Canadian folk singer, rest in peace. Not related, but I did learn they had performed together before, which I thought was interesting. Not a common last name. I was curious about that.
That's a really funny coincidence.
Mm-hmm. I had never heard of her, but I looked her up and I found her voice very attractive. Yeah,
that was
for a female singer. Yeah,
that was the one biggest point I made about the album as a whole, was that her voice is just so rich.
Yeah, raspy kind of.
Yeah, just very, very full vocals. Her range is really nice too. It's not as often that you hear a female vocalist with a bit of a deeper range. So it's always, I really enjoy hearing a strong, deeper female vocalist.
Yeah, me too.
It's so fun to listen to.
Yeah, no, that definitely caught my ear as well when I was listening to the album. And I was looking at her Bandcamp just to kind of get an idea of, what the album is about. And she mentioned that she was trying to learn more about herself while she was writing this album. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I guess that kind of goes along with the title, Healing Power.
Yeah. I was going to say it's a very uplifting album. Not all inherently in the lyrics. And I think it's done well in that kind of uplifting motivation sense, because I feel like sometimes it can kind of be almost a little corny when it's overdone, where it's oh, this is real motivational music. But I feel like it's really well done in the sense that it's uplifting, kind of empowering feeling without being too on the nose with it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think the album, for the most part, I didn't hear a lot of distorted guitar. There was some in some of the songs, but later on when you get into You Don't Get Me Now, I love the distorted guitar in that song. Mm-hmm. Kind of ending off the album.
Yeah, the kind of contrast.
Yeah, just from the entire album.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I also noticed is that in some of her songs, she'll have a guitar or bass that kind of grounds the song. I was listening to it in my headphones and I'd hear it on one ear, or we're just going dun dun dun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I just really love that as well. It's, I don't know, I just love when artists do that in general. So I really liked that about the album as well.
I think it kind of helps with the movement of it. It's really, I wrote down that it's very the production's very upbeat, but also kind of sunny. It's very warm, I think. And I think having that kind of contrasting moment of them putting a little bit more of a filtered guitar in a few of the songs makes those points stand out so much more. Because otherwise it's so very, very bright in the production. Yeah, I really enjoyed, even just in general, it has that kind of, I got feels of kind of classic rock, classic sort of bluesy feel with some of the guitar licks, and then almost bringing a little further back into, classic, almost 60s rock with the kind of upbeatness of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of reminding me of Janis Joplin almost.
Yeah. Her voice too. I got Joan Jett vibes from it. Just
definitely.
the kind of the tone of her voice, which is fun. I think she fits that kind of. She fills in that sound nicely. She knows her niche.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
which
for
is
sure.
Always good. I also think that the length of the album is just a good length. 12 songs, 40 minutes. It's not too long, not too short. I'm very picky, I feel, when it comes to album length. So when there's a good timed album, good paced, it's very satisfying.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think once for me personally, once it gets to the 1 hour mark,
Yeah.
I'm basically done.
It's a
I don't
little,
wanna sing anymore.
it gets a little bit much at that point. Even in terms of like how many songs. Yeah. I think it was just very well rounded.
Yeah. I agree. And one of my favorite songs from the album was Kept You in My Pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I really loved about the song was her vocals were very present in this song. It was really the main focus.
Mm-hmm.
And there was music in the background, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love her voice so much. And just having a song where that really shines through, for me at least, was really great.
Yeah. I think the cleanness of the production really serves to highlight her voice really well with like we said about how it's not super filtered or super synthy.
Yeah.
So that, it really, her vocals are kind of the focal point, which works really well for her vocals in particular because they're just so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, I appreciated kind of listening to, this album is sort of more pop rock, I guess. That's also how she describes the album as well. But I've been listening to a lot of sort of experimental music lately. So it was nice to kind of get back to this type of...
Yeah, like something more accessible.
Yeah, especially compared to the Faith Healer one that I was going to talk about. I listened to that one first, and then I came over and listened to Healing Power, and I was like, wow, this is just like, compared to what I was just listening to, it's so like forward and clean and just so lovely.
Yeah. I can't say the same about mine. But we'll get into that later.
I wrote down, I think my favorite track, I really liked Fired My Man. I felt like that one was a little bit less of the kind of like super strong vocals as much. There was kind of almost some like talkier vocals in that one, which I enjoyed the sort of contrast. And I also just thought the lyrics were fun lyrics in the album as a whole, I think.
I sort of found it different from some of the other tracks personally. And that's kind of why I was a little bit surprised when I listened to it.
Yeah.
But
I think that's why I kind of enjoyed it, is because it almost caught me a little off guard compared to the other songs. I was like, oh, this one's fun. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. So I guess we'll move on to the next album.
Nice.
And that is The Hand That Fits the Glove by Faith Healer.
Yeah. So I actually hadn't listened to this album. I was just kind of going through. I had listened to like 5 or 6 different ones, trying to decide which one I wanted to play. And then I saw this one on the Earshot charts, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard of this artist, but I listened to a few tracks, and I was like, this is interesting. It's fun. They're a band from Edmonton, fronted by the singer-songwriter Jessica Jalbert, with instrumentalist Rennie Wilson. She's made a lot of music under like her own name as well. She's been in the game for a while. So I'll have to go back and kind of listen retroactively to a lot of this, because I really enjoyed this album. I thought it was quite whimsical almost.
Yeah.
And it fits under like that perfect length category for me as well, because it's like 8 songs, half an hour. Yeah. And it almost feels longer, which I don't think was in a bad way. I found it kind of meandered a lot, but in like a satisfying way. Like it goes to a lot of places almost.
I noticed that as well.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of different sounds as well. Some synths, some electronic sounds.
Even layers, and like I think there were a few tracks where they had just some kind of like ambient background vocals or like background like talking and things, which I personally really like. A built up production in like this kind of got more into the sort of like shoegazy pocket as opposed to as much like experimental layers. Like it's kind of just getting more like fuzzy, which I really like personally. I also noticed that a few of the tracks like do the thing where they perfectly fade into each other, which is just like a personal, like something is very satisfying about when that happens, especially when you go top to bottom. I have it written down from when I was first listening. I was trying to figure out kind of the vibes that I was getting, and I got, in terms of like the experimental poppiness of it, because it's still sort of pop in nature. It kind of reminded me of Always, especially their like more recent Blue Rev album with like the sort of shoegazy, really filtered-y guitars. Yeah. But then I also have written that it was Always meets Mitski, because it reminded me a lot as well of Mitski's newest album, and like the kind of like whimsical lyrics and those sort of topics and themes almost I found were quite similar to Mitsuki's newest album.
I also found like their voices sound very, very similar. At first, I thought it was almost her.
I know. It like I got like halfway through and I was like, wow, this actually it reminds me a lot of Mitsuki's, particularly her new album, which I really enjoyed. It has like that sort of pop feel, but it kind of gets out of the realms of typical pop. Yeah. In terms of songs that I had written down, I liked Grind. I found that the meandering was really strong in that song, as in like, you know, it has kind of the chorus and the verse structure that you'd find in a pop song, but it's like, how are we going to get there? Where is it going to take us in between all of that? And I found, I like that it has like the kind of whimsy in the lyrics, but the production layers in the sense that it still has some structure, but it's got a lot of fuzz in between all of that, if that makes sense.
I have it written down that Grand was actually my favorite song.
Yeah,
I just really loved, and I sort of heard the synths in there as well, and I just really love synths.
Yeah,
that's just me. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a fun use of them. Like it all just kind of ties together really nicely, even when there are so many layers going on. They all fit together into a really nice puzzle. Yeah, I like the shoegazy, but then also almost still sort of jazzy. And like some of the bass lines of the songs were pretty strong, kind of groovy in driving it.
Yeah.
There was one song towards the end that had a pretty fun guitar solo off the top of my head. I can't remember which one it was, but I remember hearing it and was like, oh, this is not what I expected, but this is enjoyable. I think the contrast.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say going back to that kind of jazz feeling you're talking about. I remember in Stranger, I kind of felt, I don't know if it's like a blues or something like that. It was different than the rest of the album. Like when I got to that song, I was kind of surprised, like, oh, this is where they want to take it.
Yeah, I always enjoy that, where it's got like still has like the drive and the strength of like a pop song, or like the structure almost, but then you get into like maybe a little bit more groove in the bass line, or maybe there's more strange ambient sounds in the background. Like it's there, but it's outside the box, which I like. And I think it contrasts really nicely with like you said, the kind of groovier, almost bluesy bass and guitar lines in that song.
Yeah.
With like the rest of the album, maybe a little less structured.
Yeah. No, overall, I thought it was a very pleasant album to listen to.
Yeah.
I just like, my ears were just like, yes.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. It's got like, I don't want to say unease, because I feel like it has a negative kind of connotation, but I think it comes from the sort of all the places that it goes. You're almost like, where's it going to go next? Like, what's, you know, a song comes on, you're like, what's going to come out of this? It's kind of at least in terms of giving it a first few listens, it's fun to kind of be surprised by what comes from the record.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, very fun album. Moving on, let's talk about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Yeah, talk about a mouthful there. So they are, so I'm reviewing the Silver Chord by them, which is their newest album. This is their second album this year, actually, which is like light work for them. I'm hearing, because they've in the last year dropped like 4, and like in the past like committed to like 5 in a year, which is, I mean, like you have to respect the work ethic there.
I was so surprised when I saw only 2 albums this year.
I know.
I was like, unusual.
I checked their Spotify, and I feel like I haven't in the past few months, and I went there and I was like, oh, I haven't seen or heard of any of these albums now since this one that was like half a year ago. But I love and respect that, because I feel like there's not many artists that can do that and produce such a quantity of music that is all consistently listened to and appreciated. I think it's so fun that they're so successful with that.
It's true, because a lot of people just kind of put out singles and they burn out kind of, but I have to respect the grind there.
100%.
Yeah. And so they're actually from Australia, and they've kind of like made a name for themselves, I guess, like being able to kind of like genre hop and things like that, because I wasn't aware, just listening to this album, you'd think they were kind of like an experimental electronic group, but they're actually like a thrash metal band, which I was surprised to hear, like listening to their other ones. So this was kind of like quite a jump from their other usual work, I guess. But yeah, so like this one was 14 tracks. There were like 7 original ones, and then the other half was like extended mixes of the previous one. So at first I wasn't sure about that. I've never seen an album like structured like that. It's kind of like 2 different versions of the same record. So I found like the first half was kind of like more concise and like short. And then the other half was kind of like, there's less structure to it. So I guess it kind of depends on like, if you're like a hardcore fan, I think you'd prefer the latter half of the album. I mean, so the sound itself, it kind of reminded me of like Kraftwerk and like Aphex Twin and stuff.
Yeah,
like
kind of almost industrial.
Very, very, very much so. Like lots of like synths, like use like and like vocoders and things like that, which like the Silver Chord, the title track specifically, kind of like uses a lot of those that were kind of like reminiscent of like Kid A by like Radiohead. Like that, that's robotic voice. Like really compressed. And so like, if you like stuff like that, I'd say that's probably like a highlight of the album. And even also like the album cover too. I wanted to talk about was like also very Kraftwerk-esque, I think, because like the uniformity of it and like how they're all kind of wearing the same sunglasses and standing together. I really like that. I
had written down like the layered synthy kind of like 70s, 80s intro, like when synths first started like really entering the mainstream. That's like what even the album cover just reminded me of. I was like, that's very classic. It's fun. It's like you can even hear like touches of like disco too, like towards the end of it. Just like it's really like a blend of genres. Like I wrote here like Gilgamesh, the track Gilgamesh in particular, like you kind of go through all this electronic stuff before you hit this song, and then it's like metal like throat singing in this one, which I thought kind of threw me off. But like I guess for people who like that kind of music, probably, or just like have like their music in the past, we're kind of like used to it. I'd say though my favorites were the title track and then a track called Set, which I found like had like a motif, like the most like repetitiveness to it. So it was more like memorable, but the other ones were kind of more like they were just experimenting and then they hit record kind of. That's what I found. But yeah, I'm kind of like excited to see where they continue to go with electronic music. I love that they can just do what they do and they have just such that die-hard like fan base. I think it's so fun. Like, you know, there are some real like the King Gizzard fans are such fans. And I like that because there's almost then when you have such a devoted fan base, you can build kind of the relationship back and forth. Like the extended editions or the extended mixes, I'd written down like they know their audience. Like they know that really people like, you know, are going to listen to and enjoy the more experimental kind of extended bits.
Actually, so like on YouTube, fun. Like I saw a fan. I was searching for the album on YouTube, and like I saw fans like post like they made their own extended version of the extended version on YouTube. So yeah, I wasn't aware that they were like had that much of a dedicated fan base. But it's endearing.
Yeah. You gotta respect it. I don't think anyone's really doing it quite like King Gizzard are with just like the variety they put out too. It's awesome. It really is. Even coming from someone like I don't really listen to them that frequently, but I can still really appreciate what goes into their work. I'd also written that I enjoyed the kind of variety in the tracks themselves, like with the more kind of traditional style. I really like the one with the throat singing because
you did.
I've seen a few videos of like a Mongolian like traditional like kind of post rock like proggy band, and it reminded me of them, which I think is just fun to kind of mix the like traditional singing with kind of the more experimental sound. I think it's just a fun blend that you don't get in mainstream music very often. I'd also written that I got like with the more electronic songs with like the kind of long runtime of some of them, it reminded me a bit of Tame Impala, just, Australian electronic
That's
music,
true.
maybe a little too on the nose of me. But even the more like industrial tracks kind of gone to like this sort of Death Gripsy vibe, which I personally enjoy with like the industrial rap and what have you. But that's what I enjoy is there's something for everyone when it comes to their discography.
They have a really wide variety of, albums and songs, but it's all really well produced, regardless of, how different everything is. And that's something that I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of artists would be able to sort of go through that. And I don't know. I was talking to another band the other day, and they were even talking about how even learning how to do something like distorted guitar when you're mixing can be difficult, and just learning all the new things. So I just really love that they keep releasing all these new sounds, and every time they release a new album, I never know what I'm going into.
Yeah.
So,
I think that like really speaks to like their musicality too. Like you said, like with that band, like some people might just think, oh, it's just noise. Like it's not like how hard can it be? But I think like people don't realize like there's like a method to that, I guess, too. So it kind of speaks to like how much they've like, excelled at their instruments and things like that.
That's the thing. It's hard to even think of many artists that could be doing like quite this much, because you find, like we've been talking about, you kind of find your niche that you fall into, and then your fans kind of expect that from you, which I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. You make what you enjoy and you make what you're good at, because then it's going to sound good and people are going to like it. But when you're able to kind of transform that and do that in like 20 different genres with a bunch of different techniques and that are like unique to what you're doing, I think it really opens a lot of doors, both for the listeners and the musicians.
I agree. So because like, especially it's probably most evident with this band, like, cause they've gotten this track record being this great metal group, and then they just throw out a electronic record, but their fans still receive it so well. Just like, it shows like how much these fans are dedicated, but also like why they're dedicated is because they put out good music. I guess.
There's quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Great album and a great listen. If you want to take a look at it, shall we play a song?
Yeah,
the album?
Sure.
I'll play Gilgamesh.
Sure,
kind of,
I think that's a good.
Let's go into some metal music.
But thank you for joining me today on Open Mic.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.